The International Council on Museums states that a museum is a non-profit making permanent institution which acquires, conserves, researches, communicates, and exhibits for purposes of study, education, and enjoyment, material evidence of people and their environment. That definition fits the Wilmington Railroad Museum at Wilmington, North Carolina to a T. This place, more than any I've visited, really tells the story of the Atlantic Coastline Railroad. Outside the focal piece is the ACL 250, a Baldwin-built 460 locomotive for smaller passenger trains. Serving mostly in the Carolinas, it was retired in 1950 and moved to ACL's Uceda shops in Tampa for display. Then it came back to Wilmington and the museum in 1984. In the front yard sits an M5 caboose. It's painted in ACL colors, though there is some controversy over the fact that it was built well after the merger and is, in truth, an SCL caboose. And if that's true, it should be painted orange. Inside the Wilmington Museum, curators and volunteers have done a first-rate job with artifacts and the stories that go with them. How an engineer dressed and some of his tools. An ACL Railroad policeman's logbook and some of his tools. Company office workers and the machines they use to keep the business side of things moving. Popular Atlantic Coastline President Champ Davis has his own section. Safety artwork from the early days. Artifacts and descriptions of the passenger era. Dinner time on ACL trains was no hit-and-run fast food break. It was elegant, fancy, and delicious. Of course, my eye stopped at the Wilmington Museum's beautiful collection of roadside signs and signals. Lots of fixed signals like this ACL milepost sign, authentic with its serif numbers. A multi-aspect dwarf signal. And the star of the section, a real working Mars light. The figure-8 motion of the sealed beam light creates a flash that can be seen miles down the track. If, on a clear winter night, you ever saw a train that had one of these, you never forgot it. These were commonplace on diesel locomotives from the 40s through the late 80s. A well-equipped communication exhibit shows off a real telegraph system. Years before telephones, decades before radios, and more than a century before cell phones, this is how railroads transmitted messages, from one office to the next, dispatcher to operator, by line-side wire to towers, stations, and those boxes next to tracks, all in the dots and dashes of Morse code. You can even see how a real ACL freight office looked in the 1920s because this entire display came from the ACL freight headquarters right next door. In the back of the building, an extensive model railroad layout with settings from several major railroad towns around the area. Outside next to the building sits a Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac boxcar, donated by a former RF&P executive and beautifully restored. The boxcar, though an odd piece among all this coastline history, is an impressive greeting to the museum. My favorite piece outdoors is this classic coastline milepost, and no question of where this came from. 243 miles from Richmond and 1 mile from Wilmington. For now, in Wilmington, North Carolina, at milepost AC 244, this is Danny Harmon, out.